Send your pictures to dear old Captain Noah. Send today, send right away. Send your pictures to dear old Captain Noah. Your colored pic will do the trick. Send your pictures to dear old Captain Noah.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. That's not your studio, is it?
It's just it's just my house. It's like the big main room of our house.
Do you not have like a dedicated workspace in your house?
I do, but my computer's not there.
Oh, okay. So are you working on a comic right now? I know that's kind of a big question to ask right off the bat, but
Um, I just finished a book actually.
oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, like it's all done.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
Thanks.
Is it for Fantagraphics or what?
Well, I'm kind of at the moment looking around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you when before it comes out or around that time, you should try and get them to put your other books back into print. You
Well, believe me, I've been talking to them about that. Um, they're not actually out of print, so there's still some left.
know? Okay.
But but that's something that I'm definitely keeping an eye on because, for example, there's not much left of Artichoke Tales, and that was a hardback. So um, I was talking to Gary about like the possibility of maybe it coming out as paperback.
Oh yeah. That's great. Around the same time as your new book, or just sometime in the future?
Well, I guess that probably depends on what publisher I decide to go with.
Oh, so you're back in Seattle, but but you were in New York for a bit or something, and then you.
Yeah, we lived in New York between 2001 and 2007.
Hmm.
And then we moved back to Seattle at the end of 2007 and we've been here ever since.
And you were in New York during 9/11, I guess, or.
Yeah, because we moved in like February of 2001
Hmm.
and we moved to this apartment in Park Slope and we could see the Twin Towers from the back of our apartment. Yeah.
So you were there for all like the crazy times in New York, like.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
anthrax stuff and there were some weird times.
What was that like going from Seattle to New York City? I mean, you grew up in Washington, right?
I did. I grew up totally in Seattle and my sister actually went to college at she went to Columbia University and so I started visiting New York when she went there in the early 80s
Mhm.
and really fell in love with New York as a lot of people do. And I spent the summer with her in the summer of 1989 and I got a job at Prospect Park in Brooklyn. And I was an urban park ranger.
Oh,
I had to wear a Smokey the Bear hat and the whole ranger uniform. I mostly did kids programs, but sometimes I had to like help out at concerts in the park and stuff. But anyway, I got to know that part of Brooklyn around Prospect Park, and I really loved it. And so when we moved to New York in 2001, I knew that I wanted to live near the park. So that was, yeah.
you were already married at that point, right? When you guys moved there.
Yeah, we had just gotten married. We got married in November of 2000, and literally the day we got back from our honeymoon, my husband found out that his job was being transferred to New York, and we moved a couple months later. So we were recently married when we moved to New York.
Have you spent any time in like the middle of America, like Midwest or anything like that?
Well, I started out going to art school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. So I have lived in Chicago, but not for very long. I only lasted a semester at art school and then I quit. And it wasn't really because of Chicago. I liked Chicago, but I quickly got the sense that art school wasn't for me. So
Wait, what were you? Were you studying comics at art school? Was there?
no, I was just in their first year foundation program, and I think that in a way I was trying to do comics. Like a lot of the work I did had words and images, and I got razzed a lot for it and criticized a lot for it. That wasn't why I left art school, but I do remember that there was this very disapproving sense at the time that if you had words with your images, that somehow maybe you had not enough confidence in your images.
Yeah,
Kind of cracks me up now, but
yeah, that's so common. That's such a common story. I had the same experience. I was always
really,
where I wanted to be. I guess I wanted to be a painter. I wanted to be an artist, but I didn't really know like what that meant, like where So I just say that I wanted to be a painter. But I remember I did the same thing where my paintings were sort of narrative, and then I would just get crap from the teachers,
yeah.
about
Where
that.
did you go to school?
This was just at a community college in
Uh-huh.
Colorado, but they would say like, if a painting has words in it, it's a sign. It's not a painting, And they also, I would do like bold black lines around things. And I remember
Hmm.
my teacher telling me like, oh, the line is a crutch.
Right, right. You got to create those edges with color.
That's right. Well, now I just crosshatch all the hell. So it's like just crutches everywhere. Cartoonists kind of find out like, oh, I was supposed to be a cartoon. I was supposed to be drawing comics. Like you want to tell stories or something and you just haven't figured it out yet.
Exactly. That was where I was at in my brief stint at art school.
Mm.
But mainly I quit because I realized I wanted to get a liberal arts education. I just realized like I don't know anything. What the hell am I doing trying to make art right now? I need to learn some stuff first. So
That's amazing you were able to admit that to yourself because as a young person I would have, I feel like I knew everything and I can never admit like I don't know enough to even create art that has any kind of depth, You find that out later on as you get older. You look at the work you did when you were younger and you're just like, that's one of the things I like about cartooning too, is that like I honestly feel like people like the older you get, the better your comics get.
I hope that's true.
I think it's true. Like there are so many great examples. Like someone like Carol Tyler, for example, like her work is just better and better all the time. But it's like if you are taking it as seriously as you always did, your work is just going to get stronger because you have more to give. You have more to put into it, more experiences and stuff.
I mean, I do think that's the ideal, and yet I feel like there's so many examples of artists, not cartoonists in particular, but artists where I don't know if it's about getting tired or getting in a rut, but you do see a lot of artists as they get older, like just their stuff becomes less interesting. And I worry about that all the time, actually.
Yeah, but that's good that you worry about it. I wonder if they do. I find that like if you're a humor artist, if my sense of humor is not what it was when I was younger. Like I read the stuff that I was writing when I was in my 20s and I think it's hysterical, but I could never do that now. I don't know why. I don't know where that went. It's gone.
Oh, that's so interesting. Huh.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's something happened where maybe I'm more self-conscious. Maybe I have a little bit more empathy. I don't know what it is. Like I can't just like rattle off jokes like I used to be able to. So I worry about that now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I'm in the phase where I'm sort of tending to draw in a more pared down, less kind of labored way. And in some ways I think that's great. And I've seen that trajectory in other cartoonists as they got older that I really admire. but I feel like there can be a fine line between like paring down and just getting lazy and getting tired, because I do just get tired more easily. I mean, I'm 53 and I really do feel it. Like I just don't have as much energy as I used to. And so there is that, you know, you want to walk that line between like learning how to not waste a bunch of energy, but also just not becoming lazy, you know.
How long does it take you to do a page now?
Gosh. Well, I mean, the way I work, that makes that really hard to calculate because, like, okay, so the book I just finished has 5 stories in it, and they're all quite long. Like, the shortest one is 23 pages, and the longest one is 58 pages. So they were all quite long. And I was working on all of them kind of all at the same time. You know, like, it felt like a 5-burner stove. And depending on how things were going, I'd be working on one story for a while and then another one. And so, you know, like I didn't tend to work like really consistently on any one thing. But if I had to guess, I would say, you know, like it'd take me a couple hours to rough out a page, and then it would probably take me the longest to do my pencil draft, because often, you know, I would redraw stuff. So I would say it would probably maybe take me 2 days to get a pencil draft that I liked, and then maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours to ink.
Wow. Okay. But that's actually not that bad. I was expecting you to say a week for some reason. I was like, yeah, like a week per page.
But I found that as much as I like to think that I rough comics and then I pencil them and then I ink them, I feel like I really do like 2 full pencil drafts usually. I mean, I just wind up revising a lot. And it's interesting because I feel like I heard from a woman that I at CCS who I advised. I remember her saying, like, I've started to draw the Noah Van Sciver way. Like, I just draw the comic.
Is that good or bad?
With like no drafts or whatever. And I'm really excited that we get to talk, because like, is that really how you work? Like, you don't do drafts?
Well, yeah. I mean, I have like, for example, the one that I'm working on right now is just, I have like a sketchbook here that I just write down lists of things, and then I'll refer to these lists when I'm working on the story. Like, I know like what elements I want to be in it, like what themes. And then as I'm working on it, I just kind of put things in there and see how they fit together. But yeah, I don't do like a whole bunch of, I don't do like pencil, you know, I don't do like several different drafts or anything like that. I just kind of jump into it and go for it.
Wow. Yeah, I can't even imagine.
It's risky. But that's the fun. That's the fun of it. It's a really exciting way to work like that, you know?
I guess so. I just feel like then I would be like constantly drawing myself into a corner narratively, and then I'd have to inevitably go back and redo it anyway, because then like the story took a different direction. I mean, so you're just like, okay, that's what I have. I just have to work with what I've got. I can't go back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on what the story is. Like, if it's an autobio, I go like, well, I want to do a story about my little brother Jonah and I visiting my dad in New Mexico in like 1996. So like, I kind of remember some things. I'll just like go through a photo album and look for photos from that era, and that will inspire a bunch of stuff. And I just write down like a list of things I remember, and then I'll just go forward there. And it's amazing because your brain will line up different, like you'll make connections that you didn't even intend, you know, and you'll find like the ending that you need is always somewhere in there, either in the beginning or the middle. You've already put it there. So yeah, I don't know. It's like the magic of storytelling that like I kind of need that excitement. Like, but you know, and then I'll draw like, I don't want to talk too much about myself, but like, you know, if I'm drawing like something really loose, like I did a book called One Dirty Tree, and I just drew that in a sketchbook. Like it's a very small, I think it was even printed bigger than it was drawn, you know. It's just because the immediacy, especially if it's autobio, you want to just like get it out like a diary, you know.
Mm-hmm. I do many drafts, and then often like I'll wind up, like for example, there's a story in this book that I actually put out as a mini called Cats in Service, and it's about this woman who winds up owning a bunch of cats who have been trained to do housework, and they wear, you know, like maid outfits, and suddenly her life really changes because she doesn't have to deal with the dishes and cooking anymore. She's got that handled by the cats. But anyway, I started drawing it, and I hated all of my narration. I hated the dialogue, and I only liked the drawings. And so I went in and I basically just cut out all of the dialogue and rearranged, but I still really liked the drawings. And so like I rearranged it, you know, like cut and paste, and then like wrote a whole new story, and
Wow.
then redid the draft based on that. And that has actually become sort of a working process for me since that story. Like I've just realized that that usually like my first draft of like how I write is just it's just too much. It's just explaining too much. And but like I'm a cartoonist, so I'm used to like writing and drawing together. And so I just often just throw out the first draft of writing, even if I actually kind of like where things were going with the drawing. So I don't know. I feel like if I worked like you did, that I would just have all this just appalling, overwritten crap that.
Well, I do that. I'm guilty of that for sure. But but that's interesting because you said you simplify down your style, or you know, but it's like there's so much work that goes into just simplifying the drawing, because it's like you've drawn it so many times before you actually draw it.
Well, okay, here's another thing that's really changed for me is that like when I was, for example, like when I was doing Artichoke Tales, that book took me a long time. So my drawing style kind of changed over the course of the book in this way that like I knew was fine and natural, but like wasn't great for the look of the book. So I, you know, it was almost like I was like wearing shoes that were too small for me, because I was like trying to sort of stay with the style of the book. And part of how I did that was that I did really tight pencils, and then I light boxed them as I was inking. And I was so sick of that way of making comics by the time I finished that book that I decided that I was going to try and get away from that. And I was instead going to like do pencil drafts, and then my ink draft would be like I would draw freehand, you know, just like I would use the pencil draft as reference, but I wouldn't literally be like tracing, because I just was sick of like this just like really labored approach that I was taking. And I mean, to you, that still probably sounds like ridiculous, but for me, it really was like a way of kind of like freeing myself up to get my drawing back to be a little bit more spontaneous. And like I've been using blue pencil more because of that too, just like trying to get away from the tyranny of the light box.
Yeah, right. It's bad for your eyes too, right? I mean, you
know, it probably is.
Staring at a light all day. But also it's like you don't want to kill your line. You know, you want that life in your line. You want that spontaneity in your art. So that's another risk. Like that's why I really admire John Porcellino's work, because it's just, I don't know how he did it. Like he pared it down to only what's necessary, but his line is still so alive, you know?
Yeah.
They're kind of the magic. And I also really like when he does the ear that comes outside of the panel for some reason.
It's really charming, isn't it?
He'll do like a little cursive. It'll be like somebody saying, and then like the word "and" will be in cursive for some reason.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, another process question I was wondering about is like you used to. I read this in a Comics Journal interview with you that you would draw on tracing paper and then transfer it to Bristol. Was that with the light?
Oh, yeah. This was a system that that Jason Lutz taught me. So everything I learned about how to draw comics, I learned from Jason. So he would draw on tracing paper, and then he would flip it over and redraw it on the reverse side. And it's actually, I still use that technique sometimes when, especially like for complicated drawings where I really want to like get something right, because you know when you flip it over in reverse you can sometimes see mistakes that you can't see in your original version. So like you can fix things on the reverse side, and then basically you have like a piece of carbon paper of your drawing, and you can burnish it onto the Bristol board and then ink from that. And it's really time consuming, and I don't work that way anymore, but I did for years and years and years. I did that.
Is that the way he still works, you think?
I don't think so. This was a very long time ago that he taught that to me. It was like early 90s.
Were you serializing Artichoke Tales anywhere, or were you just holding it all until the book came out?
Oh no, I did the first 3 chapters were mini comics.
Oh, okay.
And then I decided, yeah, it's time consuming making mini comics, and I just kind of wanted to barrel ahead and finish the book. So then the last three chapters I just did for the book.
And you kind of went into the high water circle of dudes through, I guess, was Jason a part of that or not? Or who was?
No.
Tom Hart, maybe? No?
No, that happened because I just met Tom Devlin at San Diego one year. And I was already thinking about making a book that would be like short story, like my favorite short stories from my Girl Hero comics. So I decided to be done with Girl Hero, and I wanted to do this collection of like the best stories from Girl Hero, and I was talking to Black Eye about it, but I kind of got in on that action a little too late, and Michelle's graphic design career was taking off, and you know it's impossible to make any money as a small publisher. So he said, "Hey, Megan, I'm kind of closing up shop here. I'm sorry, can't do your book." And I met Tom Devlin kind of that same summer at San Diego. And then he got in touch with me a few months later and said, "Hey, I'd be into publishing that book." So that was Queen of the Black. And so the first book that Tom published, he did a lot of mini comics as High Water, but the first book that he published was James Kochalka's book, Tiny Bubbles.
Oh, yeah.
And then the second book he published was Queen of the Black. And then he kind of worked with me on the Artichoke mini comics too.
And how come you haven't collected bottle caps from Girl Hero?
Because I find those stories kind of embarrassing. I feel like maybe I will collect them when I'm much older, like when I've done more of what I think of as my real work. I'll collect them as, juvenilia. But
did you think of that as your big story though while you're working on it, and then all the rest of the short stories that were in Girl Hero were just kind of like side projects or something?
Well, so when I started doing comics, I did kind of at the behest of my boyfriend in college. he was really into comics. He liked the way I drew. And he kept saying, like, you should really draw comics. And I had never really been into comics. And he kept giving me stuff to read, and it kind of didn't make much of an impression until Julie Doucet. And that like really clinched it for me. Like, yes, I could totally imagine doing something like this. So that's kind of what got me making comics. But he loved alternative comics and underground comics. He was really kind of a superhero guy. So he was like really like, you gotta come up with like, you know, like a story that you can serialize with like ongoing characters. And he was really encouraging of doing it like adventure style. And he was, I mean, he's great. He's still a good friend of mine, John Snyder. But he was a bit of a, at that point in my life, he was a bit of a Svengali, you know, like he had so much clearer ideas about what comics should be than I did, that I, you know, a lot of his advice was really good. And so I came up with this idea of this like ongoing, you know, adventure story with these three characters that had a lot of tropes of superhero comics. But having not ever read really any superhero comics myself, I was just kind of blindly, you know,
Wow.
figuring it out. And so I thought, you know, like with John's advice and just kind of thinking it through myself, I thought, okay, that's the way you do a comic. You have like the ongoing story, and then you have the backup stories. And like Dan Clowes did it, you know, in his early 8-balls. It just seemed like the way to go. But as I was doing Girl Hero, I became much more interested and invested in the short stories. And the bottle cap started to feel like this sort of lodestone around my neck that like I had to see it through, but like the joy and the interest that I had in comics was no longer in that. It was in these short stories. So that's why I just was like, I don't have a whole lot of love for that bottle cap stuff. Like I learned a lot along the way, but like I don't think it's great work. So
Did you finish Bottle Cap?
I did, but you know how you finish something that you don't, that you just kind of, what?
Does it just kind of fizzle out at the end of it?
No, I mean, I tried to come up with an ending, but like I also kind of rushed it because I was just tired of it, you know?
Yeah. I'll bet your drawing style really like just evolves throughout that, because I've seen like some of the pages of the early part of Bottle Cap, but I haven't seen the later stuff. But then, you know, your work that's in Queen of the Black Black is like really refined, and that all comes from Girl Hero, doesn't it? The stories from.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe Queen of the Black Black as refined.
Oh, are you kidding me? There's some like now I'm spacing on the title, but the one that's painted.
Yeah, but that's like the one that I did for the book. Like there's like, I think if you look at that book, there's a real, you can see the range of me sort of figuring out how to draw comics.
How long did Girl Hero go on for? How many years?
So I started it my last year in college. So the first one came out in 1991 as a like a 10-page mini comic. And then I graduated, and then a year or so later, I applied for a Xeric grant to self-publish Girl Hero, and I redid issue number 1 longer with more stuff in it, and that came out in 92, I guess, or 93. And then the last one, so I did 6 issues, and the last one came out maybe 95 or 96. I can't remember.
Okay.
But I did 6 issues.
Were you sending those to publishers like Drawn Quarterly or Fantagraphics or those back then to try and get them to publish it?
No, I at the time had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. As far as self-publishing went, it was a weird place to be because at the time Dave Sim was like the apotheosis of the successful self-publisher. And I didn't really see myself in that mold. He had this whole, he was very didactic, like you got to put your comic out every other month. And there were all kinds of other rules around being a successful self-publisher. And I didn't fit into that, but I just, I don't know, I just didn't get the sense that what I was doing was of any interest to Drawn and Quarterly or Fantagraphics. And I got connected to Michelle through Jason Lutz again. Jason, his first edition after he self-published Jar of Fools, and it was really successful. Michelle put out an edition of it. And then Michelle started helping me with like covers and Photoshop stuff. He's a really nice guy. He was really generous with his knowledge. That was sort of the point at which, like when I first started doing Girl Hero, you just did layout by hand and then you sent the original pages to the printer. And spot color was done with Rubylith overlays, and it was all still manual. And over those years of the 90s that I was doing Girl Hero was the transformation where everything was starting to be done on the computer, and cartoonists had to learn how to use Photoshop and color themselves and all of that.
Were you able to make a living from just self-publishing Girl Hero and support yourself?
No, but I did always make enough to publish the next issue, which was really all I cared about, was that it was self-perpetuating in that sense. So I had a day job, to pay the rent and everything, but Girl Hero paid for itself. So.
And would you get like envelopes in the mail, like with, a check for $3 or whatever an issue cost, and then you just like stack them up?
Yep. I'd get cash in the mail, like the whole like mail order trading, Fact Sheet 5, everybody had a PO box. And when I started, there were a lot of distributors, a lot of little distributors, like newsstand distributors. That was another thing that completely changed over the course of me doing Girl Hero, was there were a lot of these small distributors you could go through at the beginning, and then one by one they went out of business, went bankrupt, didn't pay you. It was messed up. But yeah, the mail order part was really fun. Yeah, people send you, and I would deal with there were a few retailers, that I dealt with directly. That's actually how I met my husband. He was working at a comic store in Seattle, and he would call me to order more Girl Hero, and the conversations got longer and longer.
I hope he was selling copies for you. He was like pushing them on customers.
He did. He had been, Xanadu was one of my better stores. Yeah.
Were you getting like other female cartoonists would write to you and stuff like that? And then like,
like early on I connected, actually through Adrienne Tomina, I connected with Ariel Bordeaux, who was doing Deep Girl. And then I can't remember how Jessica Abel and I found each other, but it was, through this whole mail order scene, and tons of them. And also the Riot Girl zine girls, because I went to Evergreen, and in my last year of Evergreen was when Bikini Kill got going, and they had this like Xerox sheet of paper that they would hand out at shows that was just lists of addresses of zines that you could order, and they put me on it. And so I got orders from that for years. That was fun.
That's awesome. Do you still have copies of Girl Hero?
Oh yeah.
That's my favorite question to ask cartoonists, because they always do. It's like, do you have copies of like the earliest books or whatever? They always have They always have somewhere like in the loft or whatever, you know.
Oh yeah, I've got my boxes. Like occasionally people will write to me and like order them and I'll send them. And like, Larry Reed at Fantagraphics did it, did an exhibition. I forget even what it was, but he wanted like the first girl hero, so I loaned him I mean they're around. They're not hard to find.
Yeah. What do you find easier about short story writing than longer? Because you've only done one like long story, which is Artichoke Tales.
Yeah.
More of like the queen of short stories.
Well, one of the things that people say to me about, especially about that Queen of the Black book, is that there's so many different styles of drawing in it.
Mhm.
Like, but all the stories look really different. And then I feel like my style kind of gelled for a while during Artichoke Tales, but as I described, I sort of felt trapped by it.
Mhm.
And in this book that I just finished, I tried to draw every story really differently. And I just think I have I just think just sticking with like one long thing for a long time just sort of kills me inside. I have a lot of ideas. Like I have so many ideas and I draw comics really slowly. And so while I'm working on something long, the other exciting ideas that I want to tackle are sort of like piling up over here. And I'm always getting like, oh, I'd rather work on that. And so I just finally realized like I'm just temperamentally not cut out for like sticking with one long thing for a really long time.
Do you have anxiety about like you finish one of your short stories that's going to be in this book later on, but don't you kind of feel like, oh, I wish I could show the world this story? Like it sucks that I have to wait.
Yeah, it has been a little frustrating. I mean, I've always felt kind of like a day late and a dollar short when it comes to the internet. Like I've never quite figured out how to like be a cartoonist
Mhm.
with the internet and like what to share and what not to share and how to share. So I just kind of gave up a few years ago.
Are you on Instagram or
I
not?
am, and I'll like post like pages, like stuff I'm working on, and it's like, but not so you could read a whole comic. Just like, oh, here's a panel of what I'm working on.
So were you? I want to know about like how scary it was when you get the call from like the New York Times to do a story for them in their fun. Doesn't that
Yeah.
don't you feel paralyzed a little bit when you get like an offer like that? We're like, oh, I don't know if I have anything good enough for this.
Well, so my baby was 8 months old,
Hmm.
and they said they called me like right before Christmas, and they said they wanted me to have like an idea in January, and then they wanted me to like, they needed to have, I think, 4 episodes ready by April.
Hmm.
So then they could start running it. They wanted like 4 in the can before starting to run it. And that the time frame seemed crazy to me, just I'm not a fast worker. I never had been a fast worker at the time. Yeah, it seemed really crazy to me. But it also felt like literally the opportunity of a lifetime. I mean, nothing even close had ever happened to me before in terms of, important people wanting comics from me. So I I do have this memory of taking a shower and just like giving myself a little talk like, Megan, you just kind of got to do this. This isn't this things like this don't come along very often. You've just got to do it. And the good thing for me is that I have always had a lot of ideas. I've always had way more comics that I wanted to make than time to make them. And one of the ideas that I actually had a fair amount of material and had given a fair amount of thought to was I'd been wanting for years to do a comic about Watergate. and it wasn't like I'd done a ton of research, but I had at least like written stuff down in a notebook and drawn some stuff and thought about it. And so I immediately thought, well, that's a good place to start because it seemed appropriate to the New York Times and the kind of people who read the New York Times. And it was something that I'd always been really excited to do. And now I kind of had a channel for it. And then I thought, well, I also just had a baby and all I can think about is babies and pregnancy and childbirth. So how can I put those two things together? And that's where I started. And yeah, I just, hired a babysitter and just forced myself to do it. And I worked at a pace on that project that I had never worked before and will probably never work again. I mean, it was a race from start to finish to stick to their deadlines.
So you had to have the new page done every week, right? Like every week you had to do the new one.
Yeah, and there was a lot of oversight. Mm-hmm. So, I had to hand in a draft and then they okay the draft and then I had to do it and then it had to go through what they call research, which is like their fact-checking department.
Oh, shit.
And copy editing. And then inevitably there'd be changes from there. And then I hired Austin English to color it for me. And it was just, it gave me a picture of like what the really successful hard driving cartoonists, how they work, which is like, I was always like starting new episodes, even as I was finishing old ones. And I was just always kind of working on 3 or 4 episodes at a time, basically, to keep the ball rolling, to keep so that there was always something that the New York Times had to look at, and there was always something for Austin to be working on. And yeah, it was, whew. I don't want to live that way. I mean, it was hard. It was really hard. But it was also really exciting, incredibly exciting.
Was there a relief when it was over, or did you kind of miss that schedule?
Well, it was always going to be that schedule. I always knew it was only going to be 24 episodes. Mm-hmm. So I think I was able to keep it up because I knew it wasn't going to last forever. And we had planned to move back to Seattle after Virginia. Mm-hmm. Our daughter was born, and we wound up putting it off for another year because of that. Just because there was no way to like move and do that comic at the same time.
So your husband recognized like what an opportunity that was.
Well, yeah. Also, I was the primary one who wanted to move.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, it was a very exciting experience.
Did you get a lot of input or not input, but like feedback from people, like readers and things like that?
I wouldn't say I got a lot of feedback, but I got feedback through the New York Times, which is just kind of unusual. And they actually printed, I think, 1 or 2 letters to the magazine, like in the final week that it ran, like people responding to it, which I was really gratified by. And I mean, it was just really neat to be living in New York when that came out. And, I'd see people on the train or whatever reading the paper and I would just think, wow, I'm in there, they may not read it, but it's available to them, and I remember also, just having, I had a little baby at the time, which is a very, it's like can be a very self-effacing experience being a parent. It's just totally not about you anymore. It's about, keeping this child alive. And I just remember having a moment on a playground where I was chatting with some really cool New York mom, and she was telling me about her cool job, and then she asked me what I did.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it just felt like so great to say, oh yeah, well, I'm doing this comic for the New York Times. And I just had never had that as a cartoonist. Like I never had any work as a cartoonist that felt like anybody cared, or you know how you always have to sort of explain yourself when you're a cartoonist.
Yep.
And that was just fun because like no explanation was required, you know. Yeah, nice. It was a sweet moment.
Is that story going to be printed in the new book?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. That's one of my favorite stories of yours, by the way. I love that comic. And it's available online. I'm going to put a link in this description of this video so people can go read it.
Thanks, Noah.
It's great. And did Austin do the coloring on it? Is that how he helped you?
Yeah, I mean, let me get this straight. I was the creative force behind the coloring. I just told him what to do. But yeah, he did all the coloring.
Oh, okay.
He saved my ass. I paid him. But yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do all of that work myself.
Yeah.
Were you? But anyway, so the new book is kind of, Watergate Sue is sort of the whole point of the new book. Like I thought, okay, I want to do a group of short stories that kind of match it in length and thematically. And then all the short stories that I did wound up being quite a bit longer than Watergate Sue. It's actually the shortest story in the book.
Oh, are you going to name it after Watergate Sue?
Originally, I thought I would, but I'm not thinking I will anymore. But I don't know, you know?
Well, anyway, I'm gonna let you go because I'm gonna go eat dinner. But I really appreciate that you gave me this time. I had a wonderful time talking to you.